Hello, today I am doing the cheese book tag. I was tagged by the creator Josh at the channel Literary Gladiators. So I'm going to pull up the questions here. So the goal is to choose a book that matches a description of a type of cheese. So number one, we have processed cheese. And it says if you don't like processed cheese, then you can choose a book that you felt was overrated. But if you like processed cheese, then choose a book that's a guilty pleasure. Now, I don't like processed cheese, but I'm going to choose a book that's a guilty pleasure anyway. So I've chosen a children's book, I Want to Go Home by Gordon Korman. I read this book for the first time when I was about 9 or 10, and I've probably read it 15 or 20 times. It's basically about these two kids who go to camp in Northern Ontario, and they don't want to be there, so they decide to escape from the island that the camp is on. Next is Emmentaler, a book with too many holes in the plot or structure. So I have chosen A Strange Manuscript found in a copper cylinder. This is kind of an early Canadian sci-fi novel. James DeMille wrote this somewhere around the 1860s, but it wasn't published until 1888. So basically, the plot of this novel is there's these rich guys out on a boat, and they're just kind of hanging around and they're really bored, and then they pull a bottle out of the ocean with a manuscript in it, and it describes how these people got sucked into a land in the center of the earth. Think Jules Verne, only really bad. Although it was quite an amusing read. I read it for a early Canadian lit course I took last summer. Number 3 is Mozzarella, a book that is rightfully renowned. So for this one, I have chosen Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. I read this last winter and really enjoyed it. Number 4 is Sharp Cheddar, a book that is great despite sparking a sudden reaction, such as fury, fear, tears, or a punch in the gut. So for this one, I have chosen The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This definitely sparked a sharp and sudden reaction, mostly tears. Number 5 is, I don't think I'm going to pronounce this right, Muenster? I don't know. I don't know much about cheese. A book that should not be judged by its cover or face value. So I have chosen Alistair MacLean's Floodgate. Do not judge this book by its cover. It's a lot better than it looks. This book basically takes place in the Netherlands. It's one of Alistair MacLean's thriller novels. Basically, terrorists threaten to destroy one of the dikes and flood an airport and a large part of the Netherlands. Number 6 is Parmigiano Reggiano, a book that is the complete package. So I have chosen 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Number 7 is Feta, a book that leaves its mark or has a strong message. So I have chosen a recent book, Exceptional Circumstances by James Bartleman. This book is about a diplomat in the Canadian Foreign Service around the time of the October Crisis in 1970, and it basically looks at how the October Crisis, which was the kidnapping of a British diplomat and a Quebec cabinet minister would have turned out if the federal government had had the same kind of powers that it has today. Number 8 is Roquefort, a book that you feel deserves greater recognition. Two Solitudes by Hugh MacLean, my favorite novel ever, one of the greatest Canadian works of literature ever written. Number 9 is Asiago, a book that was beyond your expectations. I've chosen The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. When I read this book, I wasn't really a fan of Hemingway. I had read A Movable Feast by him, and that was the only work of his that I really liked. Up until this point, I didn't really like his writing, and I did enjoy this book, so yeah, it exceeded my expectations. Number 10 is Gouda, a book that was a lighthearted delight. So, I have chosen Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. This is a book that I reread from time to time. It's a classic. Number 11, Limburger, a book that proved to be too much to endure. Burmese Days by George Orwell. I didn't like that one. And number 12, Brie, a book that gave you that warm, mushy feeling. I have chosen another childhood favorite, Freddie Goes to Florida by Walter R. Brooks. This is a book that I read over and over again when I was in elementary school. I picked up this copy at a library used book sale a couple years ago. It was a whole series of books, published, I believe, from the 1930s into the 1940s or something like that, possibly into the 50s. Basically, the premise is there's a bunch of farm animals that live in the northern United States, and they're sick and tired of the cold winters. So a bunch of them decide to go south to Florida for the winter. It's one of my favorite childhood books. Okay, so now I guess I have to tag people. I'm going to tag Malia Marie, Becca the book reviewer, Adele from the next chapter, and Book Martins. Also, Joseph, if you decide to start that booktube channel, now would be a good time. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Josh for tagging me.